I'm Josh Hatter, and I'm building a badass boutique hotel brand. You got to hear about this on the Jesse T Show.
The Mad Hatter, Josh Hatter. What's going on, brother?
I've never heard that in my 41 years of
I
life.
bet you
So
you've heard it 1,000 times.
1,000, yeah, that was like the nickname, in Little League, right? It's the easiest thing to point to. So
It's a pretty cool name, man. And it's the
I've heard
first time I've.
worse.
What's that?
I've heard worse.
You've heard worse, I'm sure. I'm sure. I can only imagine. What are some of the ones that you've heard?
Oh man, well, it's like the funniest thing that it just kind of makes me chuckle whenever there's like a telemarketer and they misread it as hater. You know,
Oh, okay.
obviously there's two T's. I kind of take exception to that. I know how to spell hater myself, so
Yep.
little cheesy, but no, man, I've been caught a lot of things. So Mad Hatter is not high on the get mad at list.
Right. No, it's a really cool name, and there's a guy in. I'm a big comic book nerd in the Batman mythos, and I think he's like the Mad Hatter too, and so that's friggin' badass. But
Nice.
it makes me think about it, man. With we're about the same age and come from the same generation. With you said people calling and saying the wrong name. Have you ever been a part of a group of friends or solo that may have prank called people and just used funny names like
Oh
Al
yeah.
Kill You or Alcoholic or like
Yeah, that's yeah, like the early Simpsons
yeah,
days.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like that was a '90s thing, like back before everybody had a cell phone and you actually called a house phone and there was no caller ID. Yeah, absolutely.
The
That's
Jerky Boys. You remember the Jerky Boys and like
oh, for
Adam
sure.
Sandler
Yeah,
and like all this crazy
absolutely.
stuff.
That
Um,
was like fifth grade for me, man. Thanks
yeah,
for
dude. So real quick, I lived in a gangster part of the world called East Boston, Massachusetts, and it was really crazy. But this will sound not as crazy. I went to a Catholic school, but we were just as gangster. Like we were badass, and we got in trouble because we started prank calling our seventh grade teacher at her house. And it got to the point where, and again, this could have been a rumor, but like supposedly she had like law enforcement involved trying to figure out who we were because like we had her in tears and it was not a good story to tell and share, but that's how bad our prank calling got at the worst.
Jeez. I mean, like I'm 41 now, and my wife and I moved into this house a little over a year ago, and it's funny because we have these like little neighborhood boys. They'll come up and like ring the doorbell and run away. Like that's the prank calling now, right? And
Yeah.
now like that's what I get. That's karma. Coming back 30 years later. Now I'm the guy opening the door, like you kids.
Ding dong ditch, man. And we used to do it all
Yeah.
the time. And I actually had a couple moments. I wasn't big into this, but there was like one or two times in my life where we had a friend that had a brilliant idea of do like a paper bag with poop inside and light it on fire. And we had only ever seen we were wild as kids, man. These are like the nice things that we did, but but thinking about it now and saying that out loud, I can't believe I was that human being.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I can't
I
believe I
think we all have
survived.
those stories, right? Like we all have those stories. At some point, you're like, "Oh, what was I thinking?"
Well, listen, man, we're kicking off this conversation, and this is all about your journey. This is your insights, any value that you feel that you've received in your life that you want to share with those that are listening and watching. So just give us a little color context as to who you are and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. So Josh Hatter grew up in Northern Virginia, outside of Washington D.C., about 20 miles outside the district. Super shitty background. So all sorts of abuse. Father died in prison. Record for the number of times that the police came to the house in one day was 3 for domestic disturbance. So finally, on the third time, is the same 2 officers, by the way. So like and I think I was probably 10 at the time. Still remember this. And the third time, one of them was like, "If you guys call us again, somebody's going to jail. Like
Yeah.
we're not just going to keep walking away from here." So super, I guess, interesting background. I think 20 years in and out of therapy probably helps kind of process some of that trauma. But yeah, I kind of tripped into corporate America 2002 and did a sales career for the better part of 20 years that I absolutely hated. Always knew I kind of wanted to do my own thing. I spent a dozen years with Fortune 500 companies, and it was rough. It just takes so long to get anything done. And I'm much more of the entrepreneur mindset. Like I don't need a perfect solution. Let's get it out there. The market will tell us, what we need to do to fix it. And so I actually wound up kind of tripping into short-term rentals in 2012. Was a part of a corporate-wide layoff with one of those Fortune 500 companies. They were splitting into 2 separate public companies, and laid off 700 people. So I got laid off with 700 of my friends, and
Wow.
I listed a condo on VRBO back in 2012 when it was still VRBO, long before the proliferation of Airbnb. And that's how I tricked into short-term rentals, and I've been playing real life Monopoly ever since.
It's a lot to unpack there, man. So in no linear fashion. I'm a Tarantino fan, so we can hop around wherever you feel
Nice.
comfortable. Just thinking about this sales career, right? And it's interesting because I recently exited being an entrepreneur off and on my whole life, from buying, selling, trading comic books, baseball cards, shoveling snow for money, kind of like the Gary V before I knew what Gary V was as a kid, to selling drugs. Like I was hustling, whatever it took. I was doing drugs, selling drugs, and then I left for the military, and it completely changed my life and got me back on the path that I was destined to be on. And I needed those experiences for so many reasons, which we could talk about another time. But sales has been my thing, and I actually shut down a wealth management company over the last 2 years as I was exiting out, and got back into corporate sales. So the opposite. And I will tell you, I can't wait to get back to being a full-time entrepreneur. It's just like it's like you said, you can learn, you can move at your own pace, you can iterate, you can respond to the needs of the market versus being stuck in a cog in the wheel, man. That's what I feel like. And I want to hear about that experience just from a very I guess from my point of view and my questions. I'm sure a lot of people that listen to this and hear this have felt something similar. Maybe they do want to go from their corporate career and they want to jump out into a passion, whether it be a side hustle that blooms, whether it be a calling, whether it might be people that I know that are in psychedelics that go have an ayahuasca journey and they go from being a doctor one day to like a breathwork facilitator the next day, and that's their calling. So what was the change like for you? What were you doing in sales? What was that career? And how did you pivot? When you got laid off, what was that like, that momentary chapter in your life like to kind of transition into real estate?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, so it was interesting. So I worked for a defense contractor for literally I think I was about 6 months shy of 20 years,
Wow.
uh, and didn't actually quit and do what I'm doing to do what I'm doing full time until December 19th of 2021. So I'm not too far into this. I probably waited 5 years too long, frankly, in hindsight. But yeah, it was exhausting, man. It's interesting. The won billions of dollars of contracts, right? For primarily supporting the U.S. Navy. Touched a little bit of everything over 20 years. But the biggest contract that I was ever part of winning was several billion dollars, right? So it was $4 billion over 10 years. And I got told no, that I couldn't bid it like 7 times by this giant, that was a Fortune 100 company, which is even worse.
Wow.
So yeah, going to through these all these management briefings where everybody has to add value, right? And
Joe
somebody,
justification.
yeah, like, well, you can't do that. You got to go back and do that, right? So, I mean, 7 times before they finally were like, okay, you can bid this thing, and then they were one of like 3 or 4 companies that won. So, yeah, it's just exhausting. Like, to me, it was the definition of insanity. I don't think I realized how much time I was wasting for so many of those dozen years, especially with Fortune 500 companies. Some people, like, you're attracted to the name, right? Like the Googles and the Microsofts. I don't know if that's a thing anymore. I guess that I'm probably dating myself by even saying that, but yeah, I mean, so like some people are just attracted to the name, but it's actually hard to have a real impact or get anything done.
Yes.
And that's exactly, it's almost, you mentioned the military, right? Which obviously I supported for a long time. And so it's almost set up to where you can't break anything, kind of similar to like changes in command, oh, let's only
Yes.
have a guy here for 2 or 3 years. That way that they can pick 1 or 2 things they want to do in their 3 years, but they won't be able to really break anything. And so it's all risk mitigation. It's all limitation of liability. So it's just super exhausting. And so going through that layoff, it was interesting. I had actually bought this condo in September, got laid off in December, right? So not like literally my furniture had I'd like ordered all this fancy furniture, didn't even get delivered, right? And so I'm sitting there in this like empty, on a futon in this like empty, beautiful condo in downtown Charleston. I'm like, this sucks. You know, I need to make at least as much money as I was, and it really forced me to look at everything, right? I had always considered myself decent with money, but I was like corporate America decent with money, right? Like,
Yes.
oh, making 6 figures since your late 20s, been able to kind of work your way up the corporate ladder a little bit. but not like, but still spending too much, like lifestyle inflation, right?
Sure.
So definitely, finally kind of checked myself, and frankly, man, like it's interesting. This house that my wife and I bought, I won't call it our forever home, but if I ever have to move again, we're hiring somebody to even pack my underwear. I can't do it anymore.
No question.
This was our 15th move in 17 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so you talk
Chasing the
about
corporate dream?
like,
Were you moving around with the jobs?
no, man, this was just seriously like just playing Monopoly, like constantly, house hacking. Bought my first house when I was 24, right? So just like constantly kind of moving to the next thing. So there was always kind of a reason, it's always a piece in the chess game, if you will. But yeah, I mean, and now we're obviously doing much bigger deals, trying to build this boutique hotel brand. So it's yeah, man, it's been interesting. I feel like now we've got like a ton of momentum, between the different businesses that I'm involved in. So, it's just a matter of like how fast can you go while still maintaining a balanced life at this point.
So it sounds like you had some experience from the personal real estate investor side. Like you said, like you always had a piece on the chessboard. You always had this, you know, second, third, fourth order effect of your moves on the table. But talk a little bit more in detail about. So you left, I think you said September, and then by a couple months later, you were in this condo with no job.
Yeah.
So did you have some money put aside that helped float you? Did you have some? So what I'm trying to figure out is how did you make that transition? But then also you kind of put down the career a little bit, but I'm assuming that career gave you some tools and some
Mhm.
contacts or some insights that you can walk into this entrepreneurship venture with. And the ultimate question behind all that would be, what was this foray like into entrepreneurship? How did you make it happen? Was it up and down for a while? And talk to us about that journey.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting, man, kind of looking back on it now. I got super lucky with the timing of some of the real estate I bought. And so despite, being there 3 months later with no job, I reset the property values in this complex. So
Wow.
I bought this little one-bedroom condo in 2012. But like I was the guy that reset everything from, the 2008 kind of crisis. Like just nothing had really changed hands. Um, you know, some things were massively overpriced going into that. So it was a big shift, resetting of expectations for the sellers. And so I got super lucky. I was literally the first guy reset these prices, and then within like 24 months, 75% of them changed hands, um,
Wow.
at, at lower valuations. Yeah, it was only 14 units, right?
Okay.
But like it just took the one domino to
Yeah.
fall. And interestingly, so I actually came in, we made an offer, and they didn't even counter. They were like so insulted by the offer because of what they had paid. And I happened to find literally the condo next door was listed. And she did like a for sale by owner. She had, slightly different financial position. So
Sure.
we wound up buying it for exactly what we offered on the first one.
Wow.
And so it was just super lucky. So I made 30%, 31% in 30 months on that. And it's one of those things. It was kind of like the edge, of where you wanted to be. I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, so it was kind of the edge of downtown, where you wanted to be at the time. And I happened to come across this 50-year study of the local college, and it was just talking about like the revitalization of this, 10 block area. And so I'm like, okay, I don't know when this will happen because it's a historic city. Things take a little bit,
Yeah, they do.
but it'll happen at some point, right? And like, so that was the other lucky piece of timing. I mean, it wasn't even 6 months. Like all this, there's a Starbucks across the street from that building now. So, you know,
Wow.
everybody knows that's like, wait, oh, you made it, right? The automatic values increase. So, yeah, everything blew past there, and then just kind of, once I saw that momentum, I just started trading up, and next place listed a bedroom on Airbnb and started a property management company, and kind of tripped into what I'm doing now. But yeah, as far as like, getting into the entrepreneurial piece, it was really trying and failing. I mean, like I started doing short-term rentals because I was building a mobile app, and so I'm like, oh, how much runway can I create here, and go do a capital raise. And, that was something that I like poured my all into. And we were off on the timing by like 2 months, 3 months,
Wow.
coming up with a monetization model. And I went back to, I had a technical co-founder, and he had another business that was just like skyrocketing consulting. And so it was like, hey man, this doesn't work anymore. The monetization model, like we're 3 months too late, right? So
Wow.
just shut it down. It was like losing a kid, I mean, it just crushed me
Yeah,
for a year or two. But what came out of that is short-term rentals for me, which now has like turned into my second career. So, I like to say the best things in life come out of the worst things. You mentioned the ups and downs. COVID was easily, hopefully for all of this generation, the worst hospitality recession in the history of mankind,
for
and
sure.
hopefully for the foreseeable future. But yeah, that very first March of 2020 should have been the first month that my management company did $100,000 in gross booking volume. We did $760. We had a single reservation. We had some emergency response workers stay in a property at a discounted rate for a couple weeks. So,
Wow.
uh, you know, supposed to be here and then literally all the way to the bottom. So it's been interesting kind of bouncing back from that. But yeah, anybody that says entrepreneurship is this like up and to the right, like you either got lucky or you're lying. I don't think
100%. Yeah.
I don't think
And the entrepreneur, they call the overnight success usually takes about 15, 20 years.
Mhm,
That's the
exactly.
entrepreneur's thing. And like, yeah, anytime you see a hockey stick growth, it's usually they're unicorns. It's a
Yeah,
one in a it's like hitting the lottery. Like most businesses fail, and then beyond most businesses fail, you have a lot of businesses that like kind of just break even or maybe make lose a little money for a few first couple of years. And then, the big bulk of businesses, it takes them time to get quote unquote their sea legs, to use a Navy reference. Like it takes some time to get their sea legs to get good at what, unless they have some luck, right? But also you're being humble. You definitely had some skill going alongside some of this luck and timing, but it does take time, and it's the war of attrition. Who's going to quit first?
yeah,
You or the business, right? And so sometimes
totally.
it's all about that long game. And so how did you keep your, because if you're in sales, right? And I got back into a nice level corporate sales job myself, but and there's a lot of opportunity for income. There's a lot of opportunity for different things, and to have done that for 20 years at the level you did, I'm assuming, financially you were doing well, at least from a salary standpoint. How did you bridge the gap through some of these downtimes? Did you have this rental income coming in? Did you have some savings? Did you have like the missus helping you out? How did you help realize the financial part of the entrepreneur dream? Because I think that's a lot of people, they're trying to figure out how to fund their entrepreneur journey. Maybe it's a side hustle. Maybe they get a couple fix and flips, they get a couple rentals. But if you play it that way, for most people, that could take a very long time. Couple
Yeah,
$100 a rental a month. If you're doing Airbnb, VRBO, you get like, so you need, if you're playing the small money game, you need volume of units. You need a lot of opportunities, and you need X amount at capacity. And you need, like, there's a lot of things that go to this. How did you kind of figure out the money piece of the hustle?
sure. Yeah, I mean, I was super lucky. So my base plus bonus compensation was like 231,000
Yep.
annually when I left corporate America.
Yep.
So not like overly amazing. Certainly wasn't in the 1% or anything, but you can live a very good life in most cities
And
in the
let me
U.S.
just say something real quick. As a business owner, unless I was in wealth planning for a long time, so there's a lot of things you can do to offset your income and drive down taxes. You're still paying a big portion in taxes. So if you're doing 230 as a business owner, even if you pay 30 to 40% back in taxes, you're not doing 230, you're doing like 160, 170. So there is
Yeah,
a big difference going working for somebody else to being an entrepreneur.
for sure. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. And I mean, and some of that, like, I think part of the issue, especially in bigger companies in corporate America, people tie some of their self-worth to that.
They do. Their
Right.
image.
And that, yeah. And I think it's hard to leave that for a lot of people. Not just financially, but even just the ego, right? So when you're doing well, to be able to walk away from that. Like, I mean, actually, now that I say that, I'm thinking of someone just telling me like, "Oh yeah, that guy, somebody I've known for the last 10 years, like, oh, that guy went off the reservation." Right. And it's, like even still, right? Like, why would you walk away from this? Because people don't get it. And there's a lot of obviously, projected reasons for that, right? Like, jealousy, or I don't understand it or whatever, right? So you kind of have to not listen to the hate. But yeah, so in terms of financially, like I got super lucky. I got a job making a little bit more, like 5% more after that layoff with less responsibility.
That's great.
And I also, because so many people got laid off, the Warren Act, and after all these years, I should know what this stands for. It's like workforce and realignment, something. But anyway, so they have to give everybody at least 60 days notice, and especially large public companies, they go through this, many times over the years, so they have it down to a science, right? So you get the 60 days notice. I had a new job, like I'd signed my new offer letter within like 7 to 10 days of that 60. And so I went back to HR and I'm like, what do I do? And I had negotiated a severance, right? And it wasn't anything substantial, it was like 30 grand. And they're like, well, if you start your new job early, then you don't get your severance. I'm like, what do you want me to do then? They're like, I guess just hang out for 50 days.
Huh.
And I'm and I, to your point, like, I had been traveling a lot, right? And so for the first time, this is back in 2012, and I'm like, all right, I guess I'll go bowling on a Tuesday, like I'll catch up on movies, I mean, it's yeah, so I just kind of hung out, and really I think that's probably what started just the mental process of like, okay, I got lucky enough that I had a job. I kind of saw it coming, right? I got lucky enough that I had a job lined up really quickly. And then so immediately I'm like, bank the severance, right? And then let's go into this. If I'm ever in this position again, let's make sure that financially I only take the next job because I want to, not because I have to.
That's a great position to be in because most people
And
do
so
the
that's
reverse. Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, for sure. So that was kind of, I think 2012 was really when I started kind of, turning the screws on myself a little bit and kind of holding myself accountable. And really kind of start looking like, okay, how do I exit here? And I was super careful, probably overly careful. Like I said, I probably would have, probably could have grown my management business a lot faster if I left 5 years before. Because short-term rentals were wild west for a little while, and
Yeah.
as regulations are unwinding, everybody, it's kind of like a land grab from a management perspective. But in hindsight, but yeah, so kind of going through that process, it was interesting, just starting to lean into what was working. And I think like that's something else, right? So you mentioned a lot of people are in this position where they can't leave their job. It's not enough to have a passion for something, right? Like there has to be a market for it. And
Yes.
you also have to be good at it, right? So, it's those are the three things. Passion, is there actually a market where you can get paid? And do you not suck?
Yeah. Yeah.
And frankly, like, I mean, I failed probably 4 times before I found short-term rentals. And it was easy enough for me to kind of iterate. I am a data nerd, so that stuff is kind of coming in. I'm making adjustments and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I definitely sucked at the first few things and failed miserably before I finally came into short-term rentals.
You made it you alluded to one of the business iterations, I guess maybe an app that you were working on, and that was your baby, and like it broke your heart because you missed it by 3 months. What were some of the other things that you tried and quote unquote failed at, but really learned from? And it was on the job training. What were those other
Yeah.
iterations?
God, I'm like almost embarrassed to say this. So yeah, so a vending machine business, right?
I've thought the same thing. I've thought Warren Buffett. I learned from him many years ago.
Yeah.
He went around and he had oh, what was it? I don't know if it was like something to do with parking or even vending machines, but he had like hundreds of thousands of them, and like it added up over time. So yeah, don't
Yeah.
put yourself down.
But like this was more like, oh, we're gonna revolutionize this. We're gonna create like healthy vending options. You're like,
Okay, yeah.
nobody wants that crap. People that are buying stuff out of vending machines in hospitals, they want the Coke and the chips, Like just yeah. It was so we actually like bought an existing route, right? And then ran it. And it was actually me and one other guy. And I hit a point, I'm like, this is miserable. Like this is the definition of insanity. I don't want it. And so I'm like, I want out. I'm happy to sell, either to you, or we can like, split this up and sell or whatever. So I actually got out of that. Oh, the only thing I lost was my time. We had
Not
both
bad. Yeah.
invested a certain amount. And he just gave me my money back basically and ran with it. And then he wound up selling off the route for a loss like a few years later.
Yeesh.
Sorry, Colin. But yeah, and then
What were some of the products in the vending machine?
it's all crap, man. Like, I mean, it's all, high calorie, high fat, cookies and chips and sodas. Like it's all that.
So
all
you
the
didn't go the healthy route. You
people
didn't
love.
switch them to be healthy.
No, not as, so it's like, I think that's exactly, that was so there was like a franchise that was slowly growing,
Yeah, yeah.
and then 2008 hit, and it was just like, so,
Got
yeah,
it. So the dream was dashed in terms of the go to market product, and then even more so, you realized that you just hated what you were doing.
yeah, yeah, it was just like, oh, we're gonna innovate, and that's something that you need to learn from the market, right? Like, sometimes it doesn't want to be innovated.
That's right.
The old Steve Jobs joke of like, customers are stupid, they don't know what they want, you have to tell them what they want. Not necessarily true in every business, So yeah, that was a hard lesson learned. And then of course, like a lot of entrepreneurs, I tried the whole t-shirt thing and failed, right? Like, oh, I'm a witty guy, let me put that on a shirt. No, nobody wants your stuff, man. There's 10,000 people trying to do that in your city.
That's right. Yeah, because it's a low barrier to entry to go get like some
Yeah,
screen printing stuff or to get some
yeah,
tech tools, and you think you're gonna utilize your network and do social
yeah,
media and have like these different organizations you can plug into, and it's just like it just never. And that business, the price points are so low and the margins are so low that you have to do a lot of volume. So like to
yeah,
go from nothing to hundreds of units a month or more is not easy to do, especially, and this all comes is all predicated on one main thing, and it's sales. And if you're not
yeah,
good at sales or experienced in sales, and you're not versed to be able to take that sales acumen into different products or different ideas, it's
yeah.
not going to be easy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's funny. One of my wife's friends is a physician, but he has a side hustle
Of course.
of this clothing brand, right? And like, oh yeah, we did like $3 million last year. I'm like, I've never run into anybody that's like, we tried this, and like, oh yeah, now we have this
That's the rocket.
infrastructure
That's
set
the
up. Yeah,
yeah.
like good for you. Good for you. I love it. I love hearing that, right?
3 million is a
But
lot of
yeah,
clothes. Is it high end?
no, it's like it's Charleston-y type stuff,
All right. Yeah.
the frat boy polo
Yeah.
type
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. The pastels,
But
the
yeah,
Sperry's, all that.
yeah, exactly, exactly that. Yeah, and they made it work, man. So
Good for
I'm
him.
not mad at it, but that's in all my years of joking about failing there, that's the only guy I've run into that's like, oh yeah, we're crushing it doing that.
It's so wild, man. And how many dreams here's the thing though, as an entrepreneur, I started my first business technically as a kid. I had a carnival that I put together, which was like, when I say carnival, it's like come over to my driveway on the side of my house and like play this stupid little thing that I made for like a quarter and win a teddy bear that's like been a teddy bear to mine for years. Like that was like my first iteration, and then like selling comic books and like baseball
Nice.
cards, and you know, the balls that it takes, the cojones, male or female, right? Like whatever the female version of that is, without getting graphic. Um, Great for trying, like great for like going out there and having the entrepreneurial spirit, the hustle,
Yep.
the heart. But man, like most of those businesses just don't happen. And then you
Yeah.
have to either reiterate, and or you go back to the drawing board, or you go get a job, and then you go back out into the marketplace. So for you, it sounded like there was one or two more things that you did. What were those things before finding your sweet spot?
Yeah, I mean, that it's really like starting to pay attention to real estate. So I got into long-term rentals before I got into short-term. Had a property manager that didn't do their job. So wound and that was my very first house. So it was super low margin anyway. I was basically a forced landlord.
Yeah.
I did because 2008 happened, and then turned it into a long-term rental, and it was a disaster. I got super lucky. The tenant's mother co-signed, and she had a security clearance. And so, when I'm like, here's all the damage you caused when you moved out, and I threatened litigation, she wound up like, I can't go through that with my job. I'll write you a check. Right. So that
Okay.
wound up being my saving grace. Otherwise, I really would have really lost my butt on it.
Yeah.
But
You could
yeah.
say
So,
ass, by the way, Josh.
what's that? Yeah.
Ass.
Would have really
That,
lost my ass on
there
it.
we go. Yes.
Yeah.
We talked about that off
Yeah.
air for those listening and watching, as far as like being able to swear. So I just wanted to get at least one out of them.
I appreciate you dragging that out.
My
Feel
pleasure. My pleasure.
feel free to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was so 6 or 7 years doing that, and sold that off. And that was again, like every time I did something that even had like any level of success, I was really good about being a squirrel and kind of keeping it for winter, right? Like, okay,
Nice.
severance, I'm not going to piss this away. I was lucky enough to hold a house to bounce back, to at least walk with 30 grand because I
Yes.
paid the mortgage a little bit. Let's squirrel this away. And so like it just like those things over time add up, even if it's, you know,
Maintaining this is personal, but maintaining good credit, or did you have some issues with
oh yeah.
like credit along the way because of the
No,
seasons, or like because that because when you're getting into, and I've been in banking, I've been in personal real estate, I've been in investment management. If you don't have great credit and or lots of cash, it's hard to get into real estate. Now,
for sure.
unless you have some strategies, which you may have, right? I'm not the expert there, but from my experience, it's like if you don't have a lot of cash, you better have great credit, and it helps to have more cash than not if you do have
Yeah.
great credit too, because this is opportunity. When the opportunities come along, money talks in these situations, especially when the market's cyclical, like right now. And this is me speaking from my old financial planner heart. We are so way overdue for like a real correction, not like a man-made correction.
Yeah.
That it's interesting, and you see the rates continually steadily like rising. This is the Fed trying to cool off the market, take the money out of the money supply, like reduce spending, inflation, all this. This is how the business of like money in the world, the United States, works, but it just hasn't caught up yet. So the real estate still, as you know better than I do, in my mind, overpriced by a factor of a certain amount. And then also interest rates are coming up too. So people need to think about these things going in. Like it's not just good to have great credit or a lot of cash. You have to have both. And then even on top of that, I heard people that were buying houses a year or two ago that were writing like love letters to their future home. Like they would go into a real estate transaction saying, I could see raising my kids here. I can't
Yeah.
wait. It's a beautiful, it's like, holy crap. Like, holy shit. This is where the market is. So if you want to
Yeah.
speak to like maybe that part of being prepared for these opportunities, and then maybe even getting into some of these better deals that you got into.
Yeah, it's so I always say nothing good lasts forever and nothing bad lasts forever.
Sure.
The current house that we're in was actually my wife's first house, right? And so we bought a 2021 in late 2021, right? So exactly what you're talking about. Super lucky, like friend of a friend.
Yeah.
Hey, I think they're gonna list this, right? And I'm okay. Let me text the guy. And you know, Charleston's 2 degrees of separation anyway, so that helps. But you know, my wife's like, "This is ridiculous. You know, there's 10 offers. How do you differentiate yourself?" And yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was I was on the other side of that, right? So I bought my first house in 2005. Probably should not. So you mentioned credit and money. I don't think I had either one of those things, right? Like, I mean,
This
lending
is what
standards
caused
were
you caused the
crap.
bubble.
Absolutely, yeah. No, no doc, stated income loans, you know, no nothing. Let's just sign it. Like that's
Wild.
yeah, in hindsight, that's kind of a joke. Is like I probably shouldn't. So I remember calling. They had a preferred lender in this house, in this neighborhood that I bought this first house, and the mortgage lender. I'm like, you know, I slept on it. I really need a fixed rate because they're trying to sell you arms back then, right?
Yes.
And she literally laughed in my face, right? And then came back, gave me what I wanted, and then they immediately sold the loan after we closed.
Yep.
That lady worked for the 13th largest mortgage lender in the United States. They were out of business within 18 months.
It's absolutely true.
You know, I mean, it was just very different back, and that's one thing. Like, despite cheap money for way too long, you know, to your point, we are definitely overdue for a correction for sure. But the quality of loans, those lending standards have not gotten as nearly as relaxed as they were back in the mid
Which is a
2000s.
good thing. I mean, I was in
For
banking
sure.
for a while, and you've probably seen the movie The Big Short, which is a
Oh yeah.
fantastic movie.
Yep.
And it's interesting because at the end of the movie, it was like we're back to doing the same thing. We're doing the same loans, just calling them something different. Like it's just like this cyclical nature, but the market will always correct. And being in finance for many years, you know what I've learned, studied, and witnessed is, you know, it's cyclical. It's usually every 10 to 12 years we'll go on like what's called a bull run, or the market's doing really well, and then all of a sudden we need to correct, and for about a year to two, sometimes, you know, a little bit less or more, we go on a bear run, which is where we're doing a correction phase. Up until now, it's been 13, 14, I mean, since 2008, right? Or a little bit after that. It's like we're overdue. We're
Yeah.
overdue cyclically in terms of
Yeah.
the stock market was founded in 1933. And ever since then, it's been like every 10 or 12 years like clockwork. And
Yeah.
there's reasons for that.
For
Elections,
sure.
foreign policy, you're trying to
Yeah.
do different, you know how it goes, right? Everybody, people are trying to make money on the back end, like Wall Street's buying up all the, that you've probably felt this too. Have you seen Wall Street buying a lot of properties, a lot of what I've
Yeah.
seen? Yeah. Like, so how is the marketplace today for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little so I don't think it's as crazy as it was
Okay.
even 2 years ago, for sure.
Okay.
And I feel like the people, you know, so to your point, like at some point you are hopefully switching to the commercial side, right? So you're dealing with commercial bankers,
Yes.
which those deals are funded on their merits, right? And so, the potential issue there is if you are selling X revenue, but you only hit Y level, that becomes a problem,
Yeah.
right? But and if you can hit it, then you can still do the value add, right, and increase the value of the property. So it's kind of separate from, I think, what we're starting to see on the personal residence side, the primary
What are you
residence
seeing on the
side.
personal side? So someone who may be in the market today for their own, residence, primary residence, or a secondary residence for any number of reasons. What are you seeing in the market? Actually, ear to the ground, feet on the ground. You're in this day to day. Are you seeing values coming down on houses? You seeing the rates climbing a little bit? Are you seeing inventory stagnate or not? Like where is the market?
I still think there's not enough inventory compared to the demand. But yeah, I mean, one of my buddies, so the guy that actually connected me to the house we live in now, mortgage lender, and I've used him on my primary stuff for 12, 15 years. Just ran into him a couple weeks ago, and the primary side, like, things are drying up, right? But
Yes.
the funny thing is, like, those guys that were in business back in the late 2000s, they remember that, right? And so they've been crushed, to your point, 13, 14 years, like, they've been crushing it now for so long. They expected this a while ago,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
it's like, yeah, we're seeing a slowdown. I'm surprised it took this long, and so I think the people that are still buying, you have cash that you have to deploy, right? Like, if you raised investor capital, you can't just sit on it. There's no return there.
Yes.
Or if you have a 1031, right,
Yep.
and you have to, for tax reasons, you've got to deploy that within X number of days,
Yes.
or you wind up eating the taxes. And so, like, those are the people that are still buying, are the guys that have a bunch of cash.
Yeah, they're trying to stave off taxes. I mean, because 1031, you can keep rolling over for people. It's called a 1031 exchange, and it's primarily done through real estate. Whenever you have a transfer through real estate and 1031 exchange, you can transfer this into a like kind property, and basically the taxable event that you're due during that sale gets rolled over to the next one in perpetuity. So there's a lot of people, and I don't advise anymore, and I don't advise this, but there's people that try to do this until they're dead.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I have an asset listed now that I'm totally not doing this on, but we did a 1031 at the end of last year, and there's totally, like, I know a guy locally, like, it's all they do, right? And I'm just like,
They're
do you ever
playing the legal
do
loopholes.
enjoy it? Like,
Yeah. It's like,
I
let's
mean,
talk about
unless
the
you hit some, unless you're
but
like super cash flowing, right? Like, how do you ever get to enjoy you killing yourself for the last 15
this is
years?
true, and it's also it goes back to this is how the rich get richer, right? And it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's 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 the knowing of what's out there that you have available to you, and so even little things like opening an LLC or a corporation in Delaware, staving off
yeah,
state sales taxes, right? Like there's some of the biggest companies in the world do that, and
yeah,
it's they're smart to do that because there's a law taxation law book that's hundreds, if not thousands of pages long now. And there's so many legal loopholes that people, once
yeah.
they hear about these things, they're there for a reason. So
Right.
that was one of my biggest jobs as a wealth manager dealing with high net worth individuals was how do they keep more money legally? Like what thing, and also as preference, if they were into real estate, if they were into, buying fancy things like art or precious jewels or metals, like, there's a whole thing there. But at the end of the day, what do you like? What kind of life do you want to live? And I guess this kind of also comes down to legacy, right? Like what's
Yeah,
the
right.
legacy that you're trying to create? Are you trying to pass on your money? Are you trying to give it all away? Are you trying to, donate? You're trying to help the community, a sum of all. So this kind of real estate idea, I love it. And it's I don't know if you probably know this, but at least have felt this. Real estate is the number one way in the entire world how wealth is transferred out of anything else, outside of anything illegal, anything, off the books. This is like how most people inherit wealth or transfer wealth. So I think that
Yeah.
it sounds like you're onto it, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and the reality, again, kind of lucky on timing, right? With the Fed zero interest rate policy for so long,
Yes.
between super cheap money and that creating rising asset prices for so long, I take calculated risk now, right? But I also want to mitigate my downside risk too, right? So, super lucky to be able to have taken advantage of that. I still think, to your point, I mean, it's still one of the best ways to create wealth and generational wealth at that.
Yes.
There's so many, people give corporations crap for getting out of taxes, right? Especially public companies, have a fiduciary responsibility to mitigate your tax consequences,
Yes.
right, to your shareholders. But that doesn't mean that they don't exist to, the little guys here and there, us that are paying our taxes, right? We want to do the same thing. I want to keep more of my money. How do I do that?
Yeah.
what are the types of investments that allow that? And paying somebody to learn to know the tax code, right? You got
Well,
to have a good CPA.
to that point, having a good CPA, highly recommend. Don't do your taxes yourself. To learning and to being able to write things off that are legal. Here's a free one. If you are, I know for state of Georgia specifically, I don't know if it's federal or for state, but I know for sure in the state of Georgia, you can go ahead and write off 100% of any coaching consulting services that you pay for as a business owner. That's a huge way to lower your AGI, adjusted gross income. So that there's so many, and that's a free little tidbit. Like there's so many things out there that you just have to know. And so I guess, going back into your journey and going from 2012, kind of first on the block a little bit to a degree, like VRBO, and then it becomes Airbnb comes around. But now you're doing both boutique, if I remember correctly, boutique hotels that are like a couple hundred years old or
Yep.
something to this degree. And you're rehabbing them, you're revitalizing them, you're doing a lot of cool things with them. And you told me about, your goal and your vision for the future, and just talk a little bit about where you're playing these days versus like the quote unquote humble beginnings.
Yeah, it's definitely. So we created this boutique hotel brand called the True V Collection. True V is French for lucky find. So kind of an interesting. I think one single word that encapsulates what we're trying to do. And again, I said earlier, the best things in life come out of the bad things, right? And so I think coming out of COVID, what that kind of created is smaller bed and breakfast slash boutique hotel properties for the next generation, right? So typically, the people that are going to stay in a B and B, we affectionately refer to it as grandma's house, right? And so you got your 50 to 75 age demographic, where now we're trying to take these old historic homes, give them modern amenities, keep the old historic parts, the exposed brick and the fireplaces and the crazy crown molding from a couple hundred years ago. And you say a couple hundred years, the one that we closed on in December, literally 1798.
I
So
remember you saying that. I didn't want to go a few hundred years, but I was like, I
yeah,
knew it
yeah.
was in the 1700s.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I nerd out on that. This country's not that old. I think it's super cool that we bought something that's that old.
It's
So,
amazing.
and making it amazing and, modern bathrooms and all the things, right? So, but still small and kind of having that boutique experience. So, yeah, we bought our first two properties in Charleston, South Carolina. We're looking at a deal in Key West, another one in Savannah, Georgia, and our third one actually in Charleston as well. So,
Beautiful.
kind of starting to look beyond Charleston a little bit and set up that deal pipeline. But this is really, 1,000 keys, and keys equals rooms, for people not familiar with the hospitality industry, but 1,000 keys in 10 years is kind of the goal, across a half a dozen cities or so in the Southeast is what we're looking at. So, uh,
Beautiful.
yeah,
You've alluded to, there's a buddy of mine. I'll get you plugged into him if you don't know him yet. His name is Ted Phaeton. He's by day a newscaster out in Charlotte. By evening, he's a podcaster. And we've done podcast swaps. He's a guest, I'm a guest. And he's got this podcast he used to do called No Rain, No Rainbows. And you're talking about, no hardship, no learning, no. What I used to affectionately say, you can't get to the glory without going through the shit, right?
yeah,
You have the hard stuff brings gratitude. It brings experience. It brings empathy, right? Because if you've been through
totally.
something wild, like we share a lot of some similar traumas growing up with fathers being abusive or addicted to certain things. I would imagine my dad was a 30-year heroin addict before he cleaned up, and he actually became a decent dad and a good grandparent to my kids. But these struggles, they don't define you. They can help to teach you. And I have this poster and this thing behind me that I've had for years, and it says mindset is everything. And so I believe your mindset is everything. I get to versus I have to. I choose to versus like, oh, that's something I can't. Oh, it sucks. Like your mindset going into something, if it starts with gratitude, if it starts with a place of positivity, it can really reframe everything. And it sounds like you've alluded to that a bunch of times. So I want to ask you, because this podcast, we talk about a number of things: business, health and wellness, mindset, spirituality. I've kind of gotten this feeling in our conversation that you said it, you've been through talk therapy for 20 years. You have all this experience with life. And what are some of these wellness tools that you're using to kind of have this mindset going into being an entrepreneur, because it can get lonely, it can get scary, it can get bumpy, it can get, any range of emotions are going to just be exacerbated as an entrepreneur, the highs and the lows.
Yeah.
So if you could just share with us a little bit about that journey of the tools that maybe you've picked up and that you deploy along your journey.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my first of all, after 20 years of therapy, my wife would probably say I still need to go. So,
All of us
um,
do.
yeah, yeah, I'm right. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But
Keep
yeah,
going. Keep going. Yeah. Yeah.
it's interesting though, man. It's been such a crazy journey, right? So I always say nothing good lasts forever, nothing bad lasts forever.
Yes.
And I say that when stuff's going really well or really shitty,
Okay.
right? And I've got about 8 employees now with my management company, and I think it's important just to kind of provide that perspective, right? It's to me, it's if you ever watch, professional football games, right? The head coach, you got some guys that are a little emotional, right? But
Yeah.
generally, that kick goes up, whether the field goal is in or out, like, it's good or it's bad. Like, okay, like you just there's not emotion, right? You might get a little head nod if
Yeah.
they
Yeah. Yeah.
miss, right? But it's to your point, highs and lows. I actually I had a guy. I was so excited about the mobile app, right? And I take this guy to lunch who had gone through a similar experience, but he actually had a 7-figure exit. Kind of a crazy experience. The company that he sold to then sold to Trulia, which then sold to Zillow,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, a lot of vesting along the way. And so, interesting experience. So I take that guy to lunch. I'm so excited about this, right? And I've brought this up to him since, and he's like, I don't even remember saying that, but it's one of the most influential things anyone has ever said to me as an entrepreneur, which is, I don't think you realize how lonely this journey is. Right. And I mean, he would like, I'm excited. We're, catching up, right? And he got so serious and I was like, damn, what's he talking about? Like this guy like just looks like I kicked his grandma.
Yes.
And he, I mean, it stuck with me. And then about like 3 days later, it's like 2 in the morning. I don't even remember what broke, but I'm trying to fix it at 2 in the morning. And I was like, oh, that's what he meant. Right. Like that's the journey. You like look in the mirror and that's your team.
Yep. Yep.
It takes a while to be able to build a team beyond that, unless you're going to go raise money, or to your point, you already have a bunch of cash. So, it is a journey of highs and lows. That same, my technical co-founder from that mobile app startup that I was talking about, he used to always like when anything good or bad would happen, he would give me the football coach thing. So he literally would just go highs and lows, man. And he was a former Marine, right? So, anything good or bad, highs and lows, man, right? And so I don't know, like those little tidbits you kind of keep up along the way, put them in the back pocket. But yeah, I mean, nothing, it takes a lot to kind of really get under my skin. I tell my team if somebody's really being a jerk, right? We're in hospitality, so you're going to get that. 100% of people aren't amazing. So
Right.
it is what it is. And it's just like, look, no single thing can break what we've built so far.
That's
Um,
beautiful.
if COVID didn't do it, one single guest being angry on the internet with their fingers probably isn't going to do it either, right?
I don't know if intentionally, and you're a sharp guy, but like just maybe through osmosis and through iteration. But it sounds like you've built a moat to a degree around your business, and this is a big, again, going back to Uncle Warren Buffett, and some of his teachings that I used to adhere to back in the day in the financial planning realm is make yourself like hard to kill, right? Like don't leave yourself open for that one little domino in this aspect in a negative way to like knock you out of the game. And
Yeah,
again, it's the golden rule: do unto others. That's what it comes down to. I mean,
right.
it's not as easy as that, but it can be as simple as that. It can be, how do you want to be treated? Treat your employees that way, treat your partners that way, treat your clients that way, treat your day-to-day people you're connecting with that way. How could you add value to their life? And this is something I want
Right.
to segue into is you have found a way, and I'm sure this adds to your mental health and it opens up your heart more as a human being, but you found a way to help give back to a degree to people, just to give back. And you were telling me about a little group and a cohort that you've kind of put together where like there's ideas put out and there's thoughts put around. It's like maybe some thought leadership. Maybe it's like, hey, you're not in this alone. We're going through this together. So you don't feel like you're on an island. It's a sounding board. It's a place to learn. Talk a little bit about how that's manifested and the kind of like what you see that maybe turning into.
Yeah, it's so my lifelong mentor, guy that I met when I was 20 in my very first professional career. Now I call him dad. He is definitely the dad that my father never was for sure. I just had dinner with him last night, was telling him the story. So he was the best man at my wedding, right? Super close to
Love
this
that.
dude. Couldn't have kids, right? And so it's kind of interesting how our relationship unfolded over the last 20 plus years. But I was so proud to tell him because he's meant so much to me as a mentor, and he has been that steady kind of guiding hand for me. Like, hey, just so you know, like I also started this group, right? Like, and I don't have there is I'm not selling anything. Like there is no ulterior motive, right? Like, we call it revolutionary mindset mastermind. And so got a handful of people, and for no other reason than I see that you're trying to do something that I feel like I've been fortunate enough to have some success in. If your fire is already lit, let me be the accelerant. Let me be the can
Love
of
it.
gas to really make that blaze go stronger and help you create generational wealth. I think it's super interesting, man. Like I think some people have this scarcity mindset, right? And if you're doing it right, at some point you switch to abundance. I think anybody can be a millionaire. All you have to do is spend less than you make, right?
Yeah.
You can make 50 grand a year, and if you spend less than you make, by the time you're in your 60s to 70, you're still going to be able to get there, right? If you
Yes.
go the traditional route. But man, really going beyond that is, I think, when the mindset started to shift for me. And so, getting there, I think there's so much room for so many people to win, right? And if I can help somebody, I mean, I just help set up a competing property management company in Tennessee where we operate. And they already own 70 properties, right? So they're going to be
Wow.
going after larger clients. There's 14,000 rentals. I can't manage them all, like little things like that. I mean, I'm effectively helping to create a competitor. Now those guys are in the mastermind that we're in, right? So kind of similar mindset anyway.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's those types of things. It's having that mentality, trying to give back and have that mindset of abundance instead of just keeping everything right here, which a lot of times is hard with people that have traumatic backgrounds.
This reciprocity, law of attraction, abundance mindset, whatever you want to call it, it really does work. If you obviously you have to work alongside of this, but outside of your own work, if you can give back, if you can volunteer, if you can add value to somebody else, even if it's just making a connection for somebody that somehow helps them in their business or their life, right? And I've seen this happen so many times by doing this, because this is part of how I operate is if I can be of value or service to you in any way, I don't need to make a dollar by doing it. I can just help you if I can help you. And that comes back in so many ways, man. And in ways you'll never expect, and maybe ways you'll never even know. It
Totally.
could be legitimately if you believe in God, universe, source. If you don't believe in any of that stuff, whatever. It's just really beautiful to see that. And it's also a great way to do life. One of the
Yeah.
things I was reading not too long ago said a life well lived is a life of service. And so if you can be of service, you have to be fit for service. You have to be able to serve. You can't give from an empty cup, right? And so I think it's beautiful that you have found maybe part of your life's calling outside of the entrepreneurship, badass boutiques, revitalizing, these, wonderful grandma houses. This, I guess you called it Truvy.
Yeah.
These magical moments. You're basically curating magical experiences for people, but it's coming from, it sounds like, a genuine place. Yes, you want to make money. Yes, you want to grow, but you're also helping on the back end, man. So all I could say is just keep up the good work, brother.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I have the same mentality. If there's anything I can do to help anybody, joshhatter.com. You can literally schedule time on my calendar. Anything I can do, I'm happy to make connections. I believe whether people are religious or not, I definitely believe in the ripple effect, right? And so when that water when that drop hits the water, I want to do something positive. And you're right. I mean, maybe you do something small that's positive for someone else, and then you never know what they're going to do 10 people down the line. I mean, I want to be that guy, right? Don't ever be the reason somebody's angry or upset. So
It's beautifully said, brother. And you just close us out. I'll just say, something as small as a genuine smile can change the day of one person, and then who knows how that smile carries on through their day and somebody else's day. So Appreciate your brother. Thank you so much for being you.
Yeah.
Excited for us to be connected. Looking forward to seeing where our journey goes and however that unfolds. I'm excited about it and looking forward to future conversations, whether it's here or somewhere else. But thank you so much for being you. I want to be the first audience member and viewer to say, keep doing what you're doing. You're a badass. He's Josh Hatter. I'm Jesse T. Be sure to catch us on next week's episode of Jesse T Show.